Welcome, my friends. Settle in, get comfortable, and let the outside world completely fade away. The night is long, and we have a story to tell. But before we begin our journey into the shadowed halls and forbidden secrets of today's tale, I want to take a quick moment to speak with you. If you want the full continuation of these stories, more uncensored 18-plus Ancient BL content, extended scenes, and unlimited royal forbidden romance, you can join us on Patreon at SpicyAncientBL. YouTube does not allow us to show or monetize everything freely here, so the deeper, darker, and more intense versions of these romances are waiting for you there. You can find the link in the description and the pinned comment. Now, take a deep breath. Let us travel back to a time of golden empires, of blood-stained swords, and of desires so dangerously deep they could tear a dynasty apart. The autumn rain in the Jin Empire did not just fall. It wept. It lashed against the curved black rooftops of the imperial palace like 1,000 angry spirits, washing away the sins of the day. But in the deep of the night, some sins simply refused to be washed away. Crouching on the edge of the highest pavilion roof, completely hidden in the downpour, was Rong Zai. He was 22 years old, a master of the sword, and a ghost. He was the last surviving heir of the Rong noble clan, a clan that had been falsely accused of treason and slaughtered by imperial decree exactly 1 year ago. Tonight, Zai wore the pitch-black garments of a shadow assassin. The rain plastered his dark hair against his pale, strikingly beautiful face. His grip on his twin daggers was so tight, his knuckles were bone-white. His eyes, fierce and cold as a winter river, were locked onto the glowing paper windows of the courtyard below. The chambers of the second imperial prince, Prince Tianxu, the man who had signed the warrant for Zai's family, the man known across the continent as the Viper of Jin. Zai slipped from the roof, landing on the stone balcony without a single sound. He moved like smoke. He bypassed the royal guards, slipping through the heavy carved oak doors of the prince's bedchamber. The room was warm, filled with the intoxicating, heavy scent of dark lotus incense and burning sandalwood. The only light came from a single, flickering oil lamp in the center of the vast room, and there, sitting at a low wooden tea table, entirely alone, was Prince Tianxu. He was 25, wrapped in a loose midnight blue silk robe that was barely tied at his waist. His long raven hair spilled over his broad shoulders like a waterfall of ink. He was devastatingly handsome, a face carved from jade with sharp, aristocratic features and eyes the color of dark, polished amethyst. He did not look surprised. He did not call for the guards. In fact, he was calmly pouring a second cup of tea. "You are exactly 3 minutes late, Rong Zai." Tianxu's voice was a low, velvet purr that seemed to vibrate straight through the floorboards. Zai's heart slammed against his ribs. He froze in the shadows. How did he know? "Are you going to stand in the dark, dripping rainwater onto my Persian rugs?" Tianxu continued, not even looking up, taking a slow sip of his steaming tea. "Or are you going to come here and try to kill me?" A blind, suffocating rage erupted in Zai's chest. He exploded from the shadows. He crossed the room in a blur of motion, his daggers drawn, aiming directly for the prince's throat. But Tianxu was not just a politician, he was the supreme commander of the Jin armies. Before Zai's blade could even graze the prince's skin, Tianxu moved. With terrifying, flawless speed, Tianxu sidestepped the strike, grabbing Zai's wrist with a grip like an iron vise. He twisted Zai's arm, knocking the dagger to the floor, and in one fluid motion, he swept Zai's legs out from under him. Zai crashed hard onto the woven mats. Before he could scramble up, Tianxu was on top of him. The prince straddled Zai's waist, using his heavy, muscular body to pin the assassin down. Tianxu's large hand wrapped firmly around Zai's throat, not tight enough to choke him, but tight enough to prove exactly who was in control. Zai thrashed wildly, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with pure, unadulterated hatred. He glared up into the prince's calm, amethyst eyes. "Kill me," Zai spat, his voice trembling with fury. "Kill me like you killed my father, like you killed my brothers. Do it, you coward." Tianxu looked down at him. He took in the sight of Zai's wet, trembling lips, the defiant fire in his eyes, and the rapid, frantic pulse beating wildly against Tianxu's palm. The prince's gaze darkened. The corner of his mouth twitched into a slow, dangerous smile. "Kill you?" Tianxu whispered. His face leaned down, stopping mere inches from Zai's. The heat radiating off the prince's chest was overwhelming. "My dear Zai, you broke into my heavily guarded palace. You laid a weapon on an imperial prince. Death is far too easy a punishment for you." "I would rather rot in hell than be kept alive by you," Zai ground out, struggling again, but Tianxu's weight was immovable. Tianxu leaned in a fraction closer. Zai could smell the tea and dark lotus on the prince's breath. "Oh, you will go to hell eventually," Tianxu murmured, his voice dropping into a sensual, commanding rasp. "But until then..." You belong to me. You came here to be an assassin? Congratulations. You are now my personal shadow guard. You will eat when I say, sleep where I say, and protect the very life you came here to take. Zai's eyes widened in horror. I will slit your throat the moment you sleep. Tianxu chuckled softly, a sound that sent an involuntary shiver down Zai's spine. His thumb gently, almost tenderly, stroked the side of Zai's neck. Then I suppose I will just have to keep you very, very busy, little assassin. And just like that, the trap was sprung. The assassin became the shadow. For the next 2 months, Zai's life was an exquisite psychological torture. He was not thrown into the dungeons. He was given a room right next to Tianxu's. He was dressed in the fine, dark silver silks of an imperial shadow guard. His sword returned to him, but bound by a blood oath that if he struck the prince, the surviving remnants of his extended family, hidden in the southern provinces, would be executed. Tianxu knew exactly where they were. Zai was trapped. Every single morning, before the sun even crested the horizon, Zai was summoned to Tianxu's bedchamber to help him dress for the royal court. It was a calculated, intimate power play. One freezing winter morning, the bedchamber was silent, save for the crackle of the fire. Tianxu stood in the center of the room, entirely bare-chested, his arms raised slightly, waiting. Zai stood behind him, holding a heavy imperial robe woven with gold thread. He stared at the prince's broad back. It was heavily muscled, flawless, save for a long, jagged silver scar that ran down his left shoulder blade. Zai's hands tightened on the silk. He could draw his hidden dagger right now. He could end it all. Your heartbeat is too loud, Zai. Tianxu's deep voice shattered the silence, echoing in the quiet room. If you want to kill me, you must learn to mask your emotions. Zai gritted his teeth, his cheeks flushing with hot embarrassment. He stepped forward, tossing the heavy robe over Tianxu's shoulders. My emotions are disgust, Your Highness. Is that so? Tianxu asked, turning around slowly. Now they were facing each other. Zai had to reach around Tianxu's waist to tie the heavy golden sash. To do so, he had to step into the prince's personal space. Zai held his breath. He leaned in. His chest almost brushed against Tianxu's solid abdomen. The physical proximity was dizzying. Zai could feel the radiating warmth of the prince's skin. He could hear the slow, steady, maddeningly calm rhythm of Tianxu's breathing. Zai's fingers fumbled with the silk knot. His hands were shaking. He hated himself for the betrayal of his own body. Suddenly, Tianxu's large, warm hand covered Zai's trembling fingers. Zai gasped softly, his eyes snapping up to meet Tianxu's. They were inches apart. You are shaking, Tianxu murmured, his amethyst eyes completely unreadable, yet heavy with a dark, unspoken intensity. The mornings are cold, Zai lied, his voice barely above a whisper, desperately trying to pull his hands away. But Tianxu's grip was firm. Then let me warm you, Tianxu said softly. He stepped forward, forcing Zai to take a step back, then another step back, until Zai's back hit the carved wooden pillar of the bed frame. Tianxu didn't let go of Zai's hands. He pinned them gently against Zai's chest. The prince leaned down, his face hovering just a breath away from Zai's. Zai's heart was hammering so violently he thought it might shatter his ribs. Tianxu's gaze dropped to Zai's lips. The silence between them felt electric, dangerous, suggestive. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to be pushed. You hate me so loudly, Zai, Tianxu whispered, the heat of his breath washing over Zai's face. But when I touch you, your pulse tells me a very different story. Zai swallowed hard. He couldn't look away. The terrifying truth was that underneath the hatred, underneath the grief, there was an undeniable magnetic pull, a twisted fascination with the monster who held his leash. Before Zai could formulate a response, a knock sounded at the chamber doors. Tianxu closed his eyes, exhaling a soft, frustrated sigh. He stepped back, the mask of the cold, untouchable prince snapping flawlessly back into place. Finish the sash, we are leaving for the imperial hunt today. Zai stood there, his chest heaving, his skin burning where Tianxu had touched him. He tied the sash, completely terrified of the feelings blossoming in his own chest. The imperial hunt was a massive, brutal affair. Hundreds of nobles, generals, and royals gathered in the ancient autumn forests. Golden tents dotted the landscape. The air was crisp, filled with the sounds of barking hounds and the stamping of war horses. Zai rode slightly behind Tianxu, his face hidden beneath a wide bamboo hat dressed in his dark silver armor. As they arrived at the main encampment, a loud, booming laugh echoed across the field. Riding toward them on a massive black stallion was the first imperial prince, Bojing. He was a cruel, massive man known for his violent temper and his insatiable appetites. Tianxu, my little brother, Bojing sneered, pulling his horse to a halt. His eyes immediately darted past Tianxu, locking onto Zai. Bojing licked his lips. And who is this beautiful little creature hiding in your shadow? A new toy? Zai's grip on his reins tightened. He kept his head down. Tianxu's posture instantly shifted. The relaxed prince vanished. The viper of Jin emerged. "He is my personal guard, brother," Tianxu said, his voice ice-cold. "Do not look at him," Bojing laughed, a cruel, grating sound. "A guard? He looks far too delicate for a sword. Tell you what, Tianxu, let's make a wager on today's hunt. Whoever brings down the largest beast takes the boy for the night." Zai's blood ran cold. He looked up, a flash of genuine fear crossing his eyes. He had heard the rumors of what Bojing did to the servants in his palace. None of them survived the night. Before Zai could even process the threat, a sharp cracking sound echoed through the clearing. Tianxu had squeezed the heavy wooden shaft of his hunting bow so hard that it snapped entirely in half. The wood splintered, cutting into Tianxu's leather glove. The clearing fell dead silent. The laughing nobles instantly shut their mouths. Tianxu looked at his older brother. His amethyst eyes were completely devoid of light. They were the eyes of a demon. "I do not share what is mine," Tianxu whispered, his voice carrying over the wind like a death sentence. "If you so much as breathe in his direction again, brother, I will skin you alive and hang you from the palace gates. Do we have an understanding?" Bojing's face drained of color. He swallowed hard, his bravado entirely crushed by the sheer, suffocating killing intent radiating from Tianxu. He turned his horse and quickly rode away without another word. Tianxu turned his horse slightly, looking back at Zai. The terrifying aura vanished, replaced by something entirely different, something fiercely protective. "Stay close to me today," Tianxu ordered softly. "Do not leave my sight." Zai nodded, his throat dry. For the first time, he realized that the golden cage Tianxu had locked him in was actually a shield. And if you are enjoying this intense, slow-burn, forbidden tension, remember, the extended and uncensored 18-plus continuation of these stories is available on Patreon at SpicyAncientBL. The deeper romantic moments and the true, unhinged protectiveness of these royal princes are waiting for you there. The link is in the description and pinned comment. Now let us return to the shadows of the forest. The hunt began. Tianxu and Zai rode deep into the heavy woods, separating from the main hunting party. The autumn leaves were a brilliant, bloody red, falling around them like rain, but it was a trap. As they passed through a narrow ravine, the sound of a whistling arrow pierced the air. Zai's instincts screamed. "Ambush!" he roared, drawing his sword in a flash of steel. He batted the first arrow out of the air, but they weren't alone. From the ridge above, 20 men dressed in unmarked black armor appeared. They weren't hunting beasts, they were hunting the second prince. Bojing had sent his private death squad. "Dismount!" Tianxu commanded, leaping from his horse as a hail of arrows rained down on them. Zai hit the ground rolling. He moved with lethal precision, his sword dancing in the fading light, slicing through the first 3 assassins that charged him. He was beautiful and terrifying in combat. Tianxu was a god of war. He wielded a heavy silver broadsword, moving with a brutal, crushing grace, tearing through the assassins like paper, but there were too many. Zai parried a heavy strike, stumbling backward in the mud. He didn't see the archer on the ridge taking aim. "Zai!" Tianxu's voice roared over the clash of steel. Zai turned his head. He saw the arrow flying straight toward his chest. There was no time to dodge. He braced for death. But death didn't come. A heavy, massive force slammed into Zai, throwing him forcefully into the mud. Zai gasped for air, looking up to see Tianxu standing over him. The prince's face was pale, very pale. Protruding from Tianxu's right shoulder, buried deep into the muscle, was a black-fletched arrow. Zai's heart stopped. "No!" he breathed out, panic clawing at his throat. Tianxu didn't even flinch. He swung his broadsword with his left arm, decapitating the nearest assassin. "Run!" Tianxu commanded, grabbing Zai by the collar and dragging him toward the edge of the steep forested ravine. Together they threw themselves down the muddy slope, sliding violently through the thick brush and rocks, escaping the sightline of the archers. They tumbled to the bottom, crashing into a shallow stream at the mouth of a hidden rocky cave. The rain began to fall again, cold and unforgiving. Zai scrambled to his feet. He grabbed Tianxu, hauling the larger man into the dark shelter of the cave. The prince was incredibly heavy, his breathing already turning shallow and ragged. Zai laid Tianxu down against the cold stone wall. The prince's eyes were half closed, his skin covered in a cold sweat. Zai looked at the wound. The veins around the arrow shaft were turning a sickly, dark purple. "Poison," Zai whispered, his hands shaking violently. He looked at Tianxu, his chest tight with an emotion he couldn't even name. "You fool, you arrogant, stupid fool. Why did you jump in front of me?" Tianxu let out a weak, breathy chuckle, his head lolling against the stone. "You are my shadow guard, Zai. Who will polish my boots if you die?" "Shut up!" Zai cried out, a tear mixing with the rain on his face. He didn't hesitate. He tore away the layers of Tianxu's heavy silk and leather armor, exposing the prince's bare chest and the bloody wound. "Hold still," Zai ordered. He grabbed the arrow shaft. With one swift, brutal motion, he snapped the wood and yanked the arrowhead out. Tianxu groaned in agony, his back arching off the floor, his massive hands grabbing handfuls of the dirt. Zai didn't wait. He leaned down, pressing his lips directly to the bleeding wound on Tianxu's shoulder, sucking the poisoned blood out and spitting it onto the cave floor. He did it again and again. The metallic, bitter taste of blood and poison filled his mouth, but he didn't care. He couldn't let him die. He realized with crushing clarity that he absolutely could not live in a world where Tianxu did not exist. Finally, the purple hue in the veins began to fade. Zai ripped a strip of clean silk from his own inner robe and bound the wound tightly. Zai collapsed back onto his heels, panting, wiping the blood from his mouth. The cave was dark, lit only by the faint gray light of the storm outside. The sound of the rain was deafening. Tianxu slowly opened his eyes. He looked at Zai. The cold, ruthless mask was completely gone. In the shadows of the cave, stripped of his titles, stripped of his armor, Tianxu looked vulnerable. He looked human. "You could have left me," Tianxu whispered, his voice raspy and weak. "You could have walked out of this cave a free man. Your family would be avenged." Zai stared at him, his chest heaving, his emotions spiraling entirely out of control. "You killed my family, Tianxu. You signed the order. I should have let you die." "I didn't," Tianxu breathed out, his eyes filling with a desperate, ancient sorrow. Zai froze. "What?" "I didn't sign it," Tianxu murmured, reaching out with his uninjured arm. His trembling fingers caught the edge of Zai's sleeve. "It was Bojing. He forged my seal. By the time I found out, the Imperial Army was already at your gates. I rode for 3 days with no sleep trying to stop them." Zai stopped breathing. The entire foundation of his hatred, the very thing that had kept him alive for the past year, shattered into a million jagged pieces. "No," Zai whispered, shaking his head. "No, you're lying." "I managed to save your uncle and your cousins," Tianxu continued, his voice breaking. "I hid them in the south. When I saw you on my roof that night, I knew I had to trap you. If Bojing or the Emperor knew you were alive, they would torture you to death. I had to make you my prisoner, to keep you safe." A choked sob escaped Zai's throat. He fell forward, his hands pressing into the dirt on either side of Tianxu's head. His entire world was spinning. The monster he had sworn to kill was the only man who had tried to save him. Tianxu looked up at Zai, his amethyst eyes dark, heavy, and completely stripped of their defenses. He slowly lifted his hand, his warm, calloused fingers cupping Zai's wet cheek. His thumb brushed over Zai's trembling lower lip. "I have done terrible things in my life, Zai," Tianxu whispered, the space between them vanishing until they were sharing the same breath. "But keeping you by my side is the only selfish thing I have ever wanted." Zai let out a shuddering breath. He leaned into the touch, closing his eyes as the warmth of Tianxu's hand seeped into his freezing skin. He didn't pull away. He slowly lowered his head, pressing his forehead against Tianxu's. They stayed like that in the dark, the sounds of the rain masking the frantic, synced beating of their hearts. The hatred was gone. Only this terrifying, beautiful gravity remained. But the gods are cruel, and peace in the palace is a fragile, fleeting illusion. They survived the night. They were found by Tianxu's loyal guards the next morning and returned to the capital. For 3 weeks, Tianxu was bedridden, recovering from the poison. Zai never left his side. The dynamic between them had entirely transformed. The harsh orders were replaced with soft glances. When Zai fed Tianxu his medicine, their fingers would linger. In the quiet of the night, Tianxu would often reach out, pulling Zai onto the edge of the bed, burying his face in Zai's neck, breathing in his scent like a drowning man finding air. It was a beautiful, silent secret. Until the Emperor's golden carriage arrived at Tianxu's estate, it was a crisp winter morning. Zai was standing in the shadows behind a silk screen, listening as the Emperor, a cold, ruthless man, stood over Tianxu's bed. "You have recovered, my son," the Emperor announced, his voice devoid of any fatherly warmth. "Which is fortunate. I have arranged a marriage for you. The Northern Princess arrives in 5 days. You will marry her, secure the border alliance, and give me a grandson." Zai, hidden in the shadows, felt the air leave his lungs. "Married." "I decline, father," Tianxu said calmly from his bed. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "It is not a request, Tianxu. It is an edict. Furthermore, your brother Bojing has brought a troubling rumor to my attention. He claims your little shadow guard is a survivor of the traitorous Rong clan." Zai's heart stopped completely. "It is a lie," Tianxu said, his voice dropping into a deadly, icy register. "I do not care if it is a lie or the truth," the Emperor said dismissively. "He is a liability. I have already dispatched the Imperial executioners. They will take the boy tonight and hang him in the public square. You will focus on your bride." The Emperor turned and left the room. Behind the screen, Zai stood completely paralyzed. The walls were closing in, he was going to die tonight, and Tianxu was going to marry a princess. That evening, Zai was sitting on the cold stone floor of his quarters. He had locked the door, he had drawn his dagger. He would not let the executioners take him alive. He would not let them use him to blackmail Tianxu. Suddenly, the heavy wooden door of his room was kicked entirely off its hinges. The wood splintered and crashed to the floor. Standing in the doorway, breathing heavily, was Tianxu. He was not dressed in his bedclothes. He was wearing his full, heavy black armor. His sword was strapped to his waist. He looked like a god of destruction. "Tianxu!" Zai gasped, dropping his dagger and rushing forward. "What are you doing? You are supposed to be resting. The executioners are coming." "Let them come!" Tianxu snarled. He stepped into the room, grabbing Zai by the waist and pulling him violently against his armored chest. Zai's hands pushed against the cold metal, his eyes wide with panic. "You have to let me go. If you try to save me, it's treason. You will lose your title. You will lose the throne. Go to your bride." "I don't have a bride," Tianxu roared, his voice shaking the very walls of the room. He walked forward, backing Zai up until Zai's back hit the stone wall. Tianxu pinned him there, caging Zai in with his massive arms. "Look at me," Tianxu commanded, his chest heaving, his amethyst eyes burning with a desperate, unhinged fire. "Do you think I care about a throne? Do you think I care about this empire? I would burn it all to ash before I let them touch a single hair on your head." Zai's breath hitched, tears welled in his eyes. "Tianxu, they will kill you for this." "I am the Viper of Jin," Tianxu whispered fiercely, leaning in until his lips were brushing against Zai's. "I am the one who does the killing. I have already dispatched my loyal generals. Tonight, the Emperor steps down. Tonight, I take the throne by force." Zai stared at him in complete, awestruck shock. You are staging a coup? For me?" "I am taking the world, Zai," Tianxu breathed out, his hand sliding to the back of Zai's neck, tangling in his dark hair. "And I am putting it at your feet." And then Tianxu kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was an explosion. It was the breaking of a dam that had held back months of repressed desire, grief, and overwhelming love. Tianxu's mouth crashed against Zai's, hungry, desperate, and completely possessive. Zai gasped against his lips, his hands flying up to grip Tianxu's armor, anchoring himself to the prince. He opened his mouth, surrendering completely to the heat, the taste, and the overwhelming dominance of the man holding him. Tianxu groaned deep in his chest, pulling Zai tighter against him, lifting him slightly off the ground. The kiss tasted of danger, of treason, of a promise written in blood and fire. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing raggedly, their foreheads rested against one another. Tianxu's thumb gently wiped a tear from Zai's flushed cheek. "Draw your sword, my beautiful shadow," Tianxu whispered, his eyes flashing with lethal intent as he looked toward the palace gates. "We have an empire to burn," Zai smiled, a breathtaking, dangerous smile. He picked up his sword, walking out of the shadows, and stepped into the light by Tianxu's side. And that, my friends, is where we must close the book for tonight. The rebellion has begun, and the true blood-soaked romance of the new emperor and his shadow is only just starting. If you want the next part, the uncensored continuation, and more unlimited 18+ Ancient Royal BL stories, come join Spicy Ancient BL on Patreon. The deeply passionate extended chapters of Tianxu and Zai's Forbidden Rule are waiting for you there. The link is waiting for you in the description and pinned comment. Thank you for listening. Stay warm, stay safe, and until next time, keep your secrets close to your heart.